So today I want to talk about the dangers of imagination on reality. And in doing my research, the first thing that I came about was, well, does imagination affect reality at all? And it actually does. So the Thomas theorem states that if men define situations as real, they are real in their consequences. Or if I imagine something to be real, that affects my perception of that and how I respond in the real world. So a good example of this is Alice from Alice in Wonderland. Because she believed in an alternate world behind her mirror, that affected how she looked at her mirror and how she acted towards her mirror. So because she believed in this alternate world, she was able to walk towards her mirror and put her hands through and go into the Wonderland, which is where the book picks off from there. But that's a fictional example. So how does this correlate to real life? Well, there's the example of Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was a Jewish psychiatrist that lived in several Nazi concentration camps, and he says in his book, A Man's Search for Meaning, that he purposefully daydreamed about his life and his family, and he says that by thinking about better circumstances, he believes this helped him to survive. So this naturally led me to the question, well, can this ever be dangerous? And I found that yes, imagination can be dangerous. So we're going to look at medical and non-medical examples. So we're going to start with the medical examples. Schizophrenia is defined by the American Psychiatric Association as episodes where a patient is unable to differentiate between real and unreal experiences. With paranoid schizophrenia specifically, a patient may feel waves of panic or guilt, and this can lead to things like suicidal thoughts or actions, which is especially dangerous if the patient is not being treated properly. Some other mental illnesses are that of maladaptive daydreaming. Maladaptive daydreaming is when a patient is aware they're experiencing a daydream, but can't control it or turn it off. So for example, there's an anonymous forum online for maladaptive daydreamers, and one patient said that it was like she was watching a movie, and she was aware that it was a movie, but it was blaring at full volume all day, every day, and she couldn't turn it off, and it was affecting her relationships and how productive she was at school or at work. Another example is that of obsessive ruminating. Obsessive ruminating is when a patient constantly relives past mistakes and future worries. And with this, a patient, it can be very dangerous because a patient may have much worse mental illnesses down the road, such as depression or anxiety, and it can lead to substance abuse problems. So what does all of this have to do with reality? Well, with schizophrenia, because the lines between imagination and reality are blurred, if a patient has a negative imagination, they'll have a negative reality. With maladaptive daydreaming, because imagination is brought into reality, a patient may not be able to be successful at school or at work. And with obsessive ruminating, this can lead to much worse mental illnesses like depression or anxiety, which directly negatively affects reality. So what about the non-medical examples? Well, there's a quote by Graham Greene, who's known today as one of the best writers of the 20th century, and he said that hate is a failure of the imagination, and we definitely see that today. So there's two types of this. There's the racism, the sexism, the isms, and there's more serious things like genocide and oppression, and we're going to look at the genocide and oppression first. So Hitler believed in an Aryan race, and this Aryan race that he believed was superior to other races, and everyone else deserved to be killed or oppressed. And this awful, incorrect mindset didn't just harm himself, it harmed 15 to 20 million people that died during the Holocaust. So in the same way that Viktor Frankl uses imagination positively, he uses imagination to create genocide. So let's go back to the isms that I very briefly mentioned a second ago. Leila Abu-Lughod, in her article titled Attitudes Towards Muslim Women in the West, mentioned that Westerners often feel like to save Muslim women from their circumstances. And this doesn't just incite a feeling of superiority, but it also has real impacts on people's lives. So as you can see from this chart, there's a massive spike in hate crimes reported to the FBI against Muslims in 2015 and 2016. And so this directly correlates to presidential and other political campaigns happening during this time. So because influential people were talking negatively about Muslims and immigration, their massive audience base unfortunately often took that opinion to heart, and that directly correlated to negative realities for Muslims. So what do we do with all of this information? Well, for the medical side, the best thing we can do is to be aware. Be aware of these medical disorders and how they affect us. But for schizophrenia specifically, be aware of who's at risk. So for teenagers who are 30 years old, that age group is more at risk than any other age group. For maladaptive daydreaming, because there's so little information on it, being aware of the research funding would be the best idea. And for excessive ruminating, although medication can help, being aware of the non-medication answers is actually the best option. On the APA's website, there are actual articles upon articles of non-medicated answers that can help people be successful in combating that. So what can we do for the non-medical answers? Well, purposefully avoiding things like the isms, racism, or sexism. We need to be aware of how we're using our imagination if we're using it negatively. And so that's how not to do the bad thing. How do we do the good thing? Well, focusing on things like art, especially for things that have been known to help with schizophrenia, maladaptive daydreaming, and depression or anxiety can really help us. So what are the limiting factors? This argument isn't perfect. And so the limiting factors, especially that mental health is not well understood, especially maladaptive daydreaming, which is actually not part of the DSM-5, which is like an encyclopedia for all the mental illnesses that exist, because there's so little research that's been done on it. And using our imagination properly, it can be very difficult, especially if you're already using it improperly, to identify how you're using your imagination. So in review, we've talked about how it can be positive, like Alice and Viktor Frankl. We've talked about the negative aspects like Muslim women and Adolf Hitler's Aryan race. We've talked about how we can improve by focusing on art and avoiding the isms. So this is my work cited. And that's it. Thank you.
So, question. So, how valid and reliable are the sources you use, and how do you know?
I actually think my sources were very reliable, and I know because I purposefully focused on using reliable sources. So I started my research by using things like the American Psychiatric Association and MAMI, which is Mental Illness Association, Scientific American, which I know have good information. And when I built my argument from there, and I used the sources that they cited, so I could go to other good sources, and so that's why I knew my argument was based on facts, which is really important because I needed my argument to be based on things that we all understood to be true, so that I could make an argument about something new. So that's what I focused on.
All right, so if you have more time, what additional research would you conduct related to this issue?
I think I would focus on, because we now understand that imagination does affect reality negatively, how can we use, or how could we use our imagination to combat more serious things like racism, sexism, or stereotypes? Because when you think about combating those things, imagination isn't the first thing you think of. You maybe think of like police force or other things. You don't think about imagination, so what's a way that we can use imagination person by person to affect things like racism or stereotypes, to affect those problems on a larger scale?